So welcome everyone again. This webinar on motivational interviewing for behavioral health providers. This will cover modules 1 and 2. This webinar is sponsored by the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or MHTTC. And we're housed at Rutgers in the School of Health Professions in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. My name is Kati, and I'm the project coordinator of this center, and I'll be introducing the webinar and the webinar speaker for today. Next slide, please. The MHTTC is funded by SAMHSA and the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration to enhance the capacity of the behavioral health workforce to deliver evidence-based and promising practices to individuals with mental health conditions. They include evidence-based practices for serious mental health conditions, wellness and recovery, school mental health, Hispanic and Latinx mental health education, and online education courses. Next slide, please. And you can go on to the next slide. Thank you. This is just a reminder that all of our training events and programs, products, and services are available to you at no cost. In the chat box, I will share a link to our mailing list so that way you can always stay up to date with our events and announcements. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. We also want to let you know that following this webinar, you'll be asked to complete a very brief survey. We value this feedback and use it to improve our activities and inform our future activities. The surveys are also important because our continued funding is linked to the completion of these surveys. So we thank you in advance for your participation. Next slide, please. Just want to let you know that this webinar is hosted on a Zoom format feature. However, the didactic portion will be recorded, and we will stop the recording when we participate in the breakout groups, just to ensure a little bit more interaction. Next slide, please. At the time of this presentation, Miriam Delphin Rittman served as Acting Assistant Secretary for Mental Health and Substance Use at SAMHSA. The opinions expressed herein are the views of the speaker and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services, DHHS or SAMHSA. No official support or endorsement of DHHS or SAMHSA for the opinions described in this presentation is intended or should be inferred. Next slide, please. We encourage you to interact with our presenter during this webinar by using the chat feature. Please post any comments or questions you have in the chat, and I will collect your questions as we go, and I'll ask them of the presenter. The presenter will also pose questions to you, so you can also respond to them using the chat box. Next slide, please. The MHTTC network is committed to using affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all of our activities. Next slide, please. We also invite you to make note of the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline for people who are experiencing suicide, suicidal ideation, mental health, substance use, crisis intervention, emotional distress, people who are concerned about someone else in crisis. Next slide, please. So now let's begin our webinar. We have with us Joni Dolce with us today. Joni is an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions at Rutgers School of Health Professions. Joni has several years of experience working in behavioral healthcare settings, namely supported employment. Joni teaches courses in the department's undergraduate program, as well as provide training and technical assistance to behavioral healthcare providers. Her research interests include staff training and employment services, and she presents nationally on the topic of employment services and is listed as a Society for Human Resource Management recommended speaker on the topic of creating workplaces that support mental health. So at this time, I will turn it over to Joni.
Thank you so much, Kati. We're going to get right into it, but just to kind of welcome everyone and orient you to this format. As you can see, we have a large group of people. It's a meeting format. Typically, numbers this size, we would do a webinar. However, these next 3 trainings, this is module 1 and 2 of our 6-part for, 3-part training, but 6-hour total training on motivational interviewing. We want it to be interactive. We have interactive activities scattered throughout. We're going to attempt to do some breakout rooms and partnering up. So it does, it's going to be a large group, but we appreciate your participation, and we're really trying to make this as interactive as possible. With that being said, understandably, a 2-hour training, we can get fatigued, and we want to make sure we have a break. So I'm going to kind of naturally break at the end of module 1. We're going to cover module 1 today and module 2, more of an intro to motivational interviewing in the spirit of MI. We're going to break probably within the at the hour mark. So we're going to get started, but welcome today to our series on motivational interviewing. This is actually part of a training of trainers curriculum that we developed within our Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. When Kati sends out the presentation materials, she'll also include some downloadable items and resources that you can find some additional information on motivational interviewing and the entire curriculum. But throughout the 6 modules in this series, we're going to learn what MI is, where MI can be used, how to embody the spirit of MI, the processes of motivational interviewing, how to apply the foundational skills, and how to use MI skills to meet someone that you're working with wherever they are in their change process. Today, we're going to focus on an introduction to motivational interviewing and the spirit of MI. So just spend a minute about words, just so we're all kind of on the same page, but we do want to clarify the language that we're going to be using throughout the training series. We're going to refer and use the term person making the change. In your work, you might refer to this person as a job seeker, a resident, client, but we want to use a general term like person making the change, or the person thinking about the change, because change is universal, right? All of us have made changes. We've considered changes in our lives. We've maybe made some successful changes, maybe not so successful changes. And the universality of change supports many of the concepts that we'll learn today. We're also going to use practitioner or provider throughout to identify the person helping the individual making the change. Again, in your setting, that person might be referred to as a therapist or clinician, peer specialist, case manager, or other job title. But for today, just to kind of make some clarifications on terminology. Today's module, we're going to introduce you to motivational interviewing. So one of the things you'll notice, and we'll eventually get to, are the training on specific techniques. So we are going to get to that in future sessions. Today, we're really talking more about an introduction to motivational interviewing, looking at some of those practitioner characteristics that help facilitate change. Those are arguably as important to the specific techniques. Being good at the techniques in the absence of those personal characteristics that support change won't necessarily result in positive outcomes, and those positive outcomes that are associated with motivational interviewing. These qualities and characteristics support what is referred to as the spirit of MI. So without the spirit or this way of being, practitioners are really simply just practicing and implementing techniques. So this module will introduce you to MI, also the spirit of MI. In the second hour, we're going to look at that intersection of motivational interviewing and professional values, describe the role that providers have in facilitating change, and then also recognizing the writing reflex, defining what that is. We have a video that we're going to look at and kind of tease out some of those qualities that tend to be observed as the writing reflex. So without further ado, we'll get started. So I want to begin by providing some background on motivational interviewing. As you can see from this infographic, motivational interviewing has a lot of research around it. It's an evidence-based practice that's been used in a variety of settings to assist individuals in making change, behavior change, and achieving goals. It focuses on exploring and resolving ambivalence. It's geared towards understanding and enhancing those internal motivations that facilitate change. You can kind of see here that since 1990, there have been over 1,200 published studies on MI, over 200 randomized clinical trials. The research reflects the use of MI in a variety of different settings. MI was originally developed by Stephen Rolnick and William Miller about 30 years ago for use in the addictions field, specifically around smoking cessation. And since then, it's made its way into many other areas of behavioral health and other fields. It kind of moved away from MI, moved away from that directive confrontational approach that sometimes is used in substance use treatment in more of a less confrontational approach. So we're going to look at some of the different programs that MI can be used in a variety of different settings, and practiced in many behavioral health care settings, offers a really good framework for behavioral health services that assist individuals in achieving goals and making changes. It works because it's goal-oriented, it's goal-directed, very person-centered, incorporates many of the values that promote recovery and wellness for individuals participating in behavioral health services. It can be implemented and used in supported employment, supported education, supportive housing, substance use treatment, illness management and recovery, assertive community treatment act, inpatient and outpatient settings, and many others. So for example, supported employment and supported education are services designed to assist individuals in achieving career goals. So MI is used in supported employment and supported education to help someone assess and develop readiness and resolve ambivalence around career goals. MI is very much aligned with the goals, values, and principles of many of the helping professions. It's person-centered. As you'll see, MI focuses on the person's goals and desires, and the practitioner elicits from the person that person's own reasons for making the change. Very strengths-based. As practitioners, we really want to look for and assist individuals that we're working with in identifying what their strengths are, what are their skills, what are those positive attributes that the person has. MI helps with that. It's very collaborative. Again, aligning with many of the values in the health professions and the behavioral health professions in particular. We're working with someone, we're partnering with an individual. Very goal-focused. MI is focused on the goals of the person making the change and what those desires are. And then there's that positive focus and optimism and a sense of hope, right? So MI practitioners bring this positivity to their work. They're hopeful and optimistic that the person is able to make the change. So we all have reasons for choosing our careers. Our values, along with the values of the professions, may have guided us in a particular occupational direction. So think about, and I'm going to ask you a question, what are some of your professional values, or what's important to you in a career? You can use the chat, or if you just want to think about that, but it would be great to get some responses in the chat. So what are some of your professional values, or what's important to you in a career. For me, working on a team, working with individuals in supporting their growth is important. Looks like there might be something in the chat, Kati.
Yes, so we have someone who mentioned mutual respect.
Yes.
It certainly isn't always money. Growth.
Yeah.
Making a positive impact. Safety. Okay. Respect. Partnership. We see watching people obtain their goals and grow. Inherent worth of every individual. Promoting and highlighting client voices. Growth opportunities. Faith. My professional values include compassion, instilling hope and positivity, to be trained and groomed to grow, team collaboration, unity and vision-minded, meaningful work, meeting the patient where they are at, improving the quality of life for others.
As you can see, many of the values that are present that are maybe your own personal values or professional values that you hold are person-centered, meeting people where they're at, partnering with people, that collaborative approach, helping people achieve their goals, being optimistic, looking at people's strengths and helping them. So, we choose these professions because they align with many of our goals. And motivational interviewing is a practice that embodies many of those values that are kind of inherent in behavioral health professions and people who enter into those professions. I think someone mentioned salary. Yes, someone with a value, a work value of salary may not enter into the behavioral health field if that's something that is really a strong value that they hold. They may have other values that propel them into this field. So we're going to try to do some breakout rooms and spend a little bit of time. This is, really the meat of what our sessions here are going to be. So, Kati, are we able to do like 60 breakout rooms and have people legitimately? I asked you to reflect on a change in your life, to get you really thinking about the processes and the elements related to making a change, to start thinking about what helps and what gets in the way of change. MI, as we've discussed, is focused on behavior change, and it's a style of engaging with another person to help them build within themselves that motivation and commitment to change. And many of the supporters that you talked about built that motivation and encouragement. We know that telling people to change often results in the opposite, right? Telling someone, oh, you have to change, you can't do this anymore, you have to reach this goal, often has that opposite effect. Instead of changing, the person may push back against that change. Motivational interviewing takes a different approach. This technical definition of MI here, a collaborative conversation style that's goal-oriented, goal-oriented style of communication with a particular attention to the language of change. And it's designed to strengthen personal motivation and commitment for a specific change by eliciting from the person and exploring the person's own reasons for change within an atmosphere of acceptance and compassion. That's reworded, but that's right from Miller and Rolnick. So what's important in both the definition and what you're seeing here on the slide is that, like we mentioned, that technical piece is part of it, those technical skills. But MI really is focused on this way of being collaborative, a style of communication, and an approach to help someone build motivation to change within that person. So the definition is here. You can read what that is. sometimes people may know exactly what they want to change, or what they should change, right? But they may feel ambivalent about making that change. They may have some reservations. Other times people may know exactly what they want to change, and you'll need to work collaboratively with them to elicit this information. So working with someone collaboratively, partnering with them to really better understand what is the change that the person feels they want to make, and how you can kind of elicit that from the person. Sometimes people know exactly what they want to do in terms of changing. So the fact that MI is goal-directed is very critical. And this goal direction differentiates this counseling style, from that more client-centered counseling. So, we were working with someone to identify a desired behavior that they, an outcome, whether that's an outcome related to a goal that they're interested in achieving, maybe that's employment or another goal, or behavior change, something that they feel that they want to change. Sometimes that's substance use or whatever that change might be. Think about your own changes that you discussed in your group. For people who don't know what their desired outcome is, you may not be directly asking them about their target behavior. Instead, you may ask things like, what would you like to work on? What's important to you? What's currently getting in the way? You may need to elicit that discrepancy between their current behavior and their overall goals and values. So what are some examples of goals that you typically work on with people who are participating in your services? You can use the chat.
Hey, everyone, if you could please share in the chat.
What are some goals that you typically work on with people who are participating in your services?
So we see community integration, relapse prevention, employment, to lose weight, attend doctor's appointments.
What are the typical target behaviors for people you work with?
Saving money, long-term housing, healthy lifestyle changes, community integration, anger management, housing.
So for example, a person may have a goal of getting a job, and a target behavior might be writing a resume or any other activity that moves them closer towards this goal. So helping someone identify those goals, but also those target behaviors, which are actions that move toward change, is really critical in our work with individuals. And the role of providers, you all in helping support this change, you can play a very critical role in supporting others to make their desired changes. I mentioned in the very beginning of our sessions that the techniques and the skills, which we will get to later on in sessions, next session and the session after, are only a part of MI. The other part is the spirit, which is embodied in how you communicate, and it's communicated through you. I think you mentioned a lot of those elements of the spirit. That collaboration is a big part of that process. But let's explore the role that providers play in facilitating change and the characteristics and qualities of practitioners that convey the spirit of MI. So we're back to it with another activity. So Kati, is it feasible to do a brief breakout room again, individual characteristics that support the change process? Let's look at the role of different communication styles and how they contribute to facilitating change. So Miller and Rolnick describe these three communication styles of helpers, practitioners on a continuum. As you can see on the very far left of this continuum is a directing style. Directing style is used to provide information or instruction, and involves really kind of telling the other person what they should do, right? So an example might be a nurse explaining how to take a medication properly, or a physical therapist describing how to do a particular stretch or exercise. At the other end of the continuum is a following style. Following style is characterized by just listening to the person without introducing any information or asking any questions, and really allowing the person to lead the conversation. An example of this style can be seen when a practitioner hears out a person, right, who is expressing strong emotions, whether that's sadness or anger, excitement, or another strong emotion or feeling. The practitioner is listening with the intent of following and understanding what's being shared. And in the middle here is a guiding style. And this guiding style is best suited for motivational interviewing. A guiding style of communication conveys the message that the person is able to make their own change, and the practitioner is there to support the individual, but not by telling them how they should change, or how they can change, or bringing a specific agenda to those sessions. In the guiding style, you're not just passively listening, and you're not taking control of the conversation. You're right there in the middle. Although there may be times when a directive or following style is appropriate and needed in a given situation, motivational interviewing typically uses this guiding style of communication. Miller and Rolnick provide this helpful analogy that imagine going to another country and hiring a guide to help you. It's not the guide's job to order you, when to arrive or where to go and what to see or what to do. Neither does a good guide simply follow you around wherever you happen to wander. A skillful guide is a good listener and also offers you guidance when needed. So if you think about that analogy of going, on tours to a different country, or someone, as a tour guide, they're not just following you around, but they're also not just telling you what to do. They're there listening to what your needs are, what your interests are, what your wants are, and they're offering guidance when needed. So let's review the communication style you tend to use in order to better understand and assess your own strengths and possible areas of growth. So let's peek at some of these, different areas to describe, different words to describe directing, guiding, or following. So you just identified some of the, verbs that, or you've identified the different styles. Think about verbs that a coworker might describe your style. So, looking at these different words up here, are there any verbs here that maybe one of your colleagues or other people in your life might say, yes, that's Kati, that's, Kati, this is a verb that definitely someone would say this about my style of communication. So administer, if you think about, that's a more directing style, right? Maybe if you're a nurse or in that capacity, maybe there might be times when you need to administer, prescribe. So think about your own style. So Kati, I don't know if there's anything in the chat, but you can just unmute or type in the chat, like, what are some verbs? Maybe they're here on the slide, or maybe there are other verbs that you can think of that your colleagues might.
In the chat, people are sharing encourage and support, assertive and funny.
Yeah.
Support and collaborative, encourage and assist.
So if we think about administer, that's a more directing style. Prescribing might be a more directing style. Encouraging, more guiding, right? So
advice,
that's yeah.
Advice giving and support, direct, confront, collaborative.
being with the person. So, that's probably more on that following continuum, that you're just there, hearing out, being with the person, directing, or, collaborating, again, is guiding. Advice giving might be more of that directing style. And again, MI falls in right there in the middle in that guiding style. We want to make sure that when we're working with individuals in the change process, that we're using supports and collaboration and help in that guiding. So we want to try to really assess, are we giving advice often? Is that usually how we communicate with someone? Are we confronting someone? If that's a verb that comes to mind with your style, is that something that your coworkers might say about you? Are we, administering often? So we really want to think about where our style fits on that continuum. And we want to try to go back to that middle. We want to try to be more supportive, be more elicit information, be more collaborative, be more encouraging. We want to stay away from the more advice giving and the administering and the prescribing and the directing. We want to be more along the lines of that middle guiding. So that's not always easy. That's not something that, is easy to do. We're there to do a job. Sometimes it's very easy to slip into advice giving, but when we're working with someone and helping that person make a change, we want to make sure the verbs that best describe us aren't leaning too much towards directive or directing or and too far on the following. We want to try to really assess how we're interacting with people. So as we discussed, that directing style often doesn't have that intended effect, right? It's especially true when the person feels ambivalent or both wants to make the change and doesn't want to make the change at the same time. So instead, a very directing style can really have that opposite effect, and the person may become less likely to make the change. You may have heard this referred to as resistance, when it appears as the person is resisting your pressure to make that change. In motivational interviewing, they've moved away from the term resistance, because it has a negative connotation, it's associated pretty negatively, and instead move toward addressing the two components related to ambivalence as sustained talk and discord. Sustained talk is an argument for keeping things the same, maintaining that status quo. Sustained talk can be expressions of wanting to keep things as they are. So reasons why they need to stay the same, or concerns about not being able to make that change. This can occur really in response to providers pushing and urging for that change. So discord, you might have, heard it referred to as resistance. We're moving away from that term, is associated with interpersonal behavior between the practitioner and the person making the change. And it really almost represents a disconnect in the working relationship. And it can occur if the person doesn't feel understood, if all those qualities that we just brought up about the person who supported you, if the person feels like they're being judged, if the person feels like there's not good collaboration, the person feels like the person's not encouraging, the provider's not encouraging, discord can develop. And it indicates really that the practitioner and the person may not be on the same page, and they may be moving together differently and not in sync toward the identified goal. So, thinking about the change that you brought up earlier, you don't have to you can write it in the chat if you want, but did you feel any ambivalence about making that change? And what happened when you felt that someone might have been pushing you too hard or telling you what you needed to do? Maybe you felt some of that discord as well. So we're going to bring up actually, I think we're going to take a break. It's 4 minutes after 2. And I did say at the hour we would take a break. So why don't we take about 5 minutes break, and Kathy's going to queue up a quick, 2-minute video that we'll look at when you come back. And then we'll finish out with the spirit of MI. So you can come back at, it's 2:05 now, 2:10.
Sounds good.
Great.
See you all at 2:10.
Be heading back in. So despite understanding that we can't make someone change, it's often very hard for us not to want to use our experience and expertise to try to fix or solve a person's problem. In MI, we refer to this urge to tell the person how they should change, and using this very directing approach as the righting reflex. The righting reflex is when providers want to make changes or want to make things right or step in by telling the person how they should change their behavior. To try to make this happen, providers may argue, persuade or prod the person to make the change. And unfortunately, this often leads to the person kind of arguing, maybe not verbally, but in their reaction, they might be arguing against that change. That is sustained talk and possibly discord. So we're going to watch a brief video, couple of minutes, of an exchange between a practitioner and a person considering making a change. As we watch, write down any words or phrases that you hear the provider say that sound like the writing reflex. That may be sounding like advice giving or judgment or really directives of what the person should do. So I'm going to ask Kati to bring up the recording, and then we'll ask some questions. But think about, write down those words that sound like advice or judgmental. And after the recording, we're going to talk about what you heard Amy, who is the provider. All right. Thank you, Kati.
Over the last few sessions, Doretha has been talking with me about her goals of moving out and getting a job. We've been meeting for about 3 months. Initially, Doretha was referred to our employment services because she recently lost vision in both eyes and was interested in supports to return to work. However, as our relationship developed, Doretha has talked about her prior substance use. I am meeting with Doretha today to review her current goals. So what do you want your future to look like, say 5 years from now?
Well, I want to live in my own place with no roommates. I'll work in the restaurant business like I did before as a prep cook. I will relax in my place all day and work in the evenings. I hate to admit this, but I like to have enough money that I could start using cocaine again. It was really the only thing that has ever helped me to be alive and up. I know it will help me to get out of this funk that I'm in, not really using it heavy like I did in the past, just a little bit.
But using cocaine was how you lost your job and your place last time. Why would you want to get back into that?
I got carried away with it last time, but I'm not talking about getting back into it like that, just for the weekend or on days off.
Cocaine might kill you and has gotten you locked up and hospitalized in the past. You're addicted to it, and the same thing will happen to you again. I can't believe you'd still seriously entertain this after all the trouble you've gotten in. I don't want you ending up in jail or the hospital again.
I'm not addicted to cocaine. I just let it get out of hand in the past. I just had to keep square my job and my rent, and I would be fine.
I'm going to refer you to some NA groups near you so you can talk to others who will help you stay clean so you'll stay out of trouble. Would you take that information?
I guess.
Okay, so so just to let you know about all the recordings and the videos in this series, we asked for volunteers. These are all fictitious scenarios that we made up for the purposes of the series. So we appreciate all of the volunteers who spent their time doing this. It was during COVID, so they were in different locations. So getting back to what did you hear Amy, the provider, say that indicated that she was having this writing reflex, that she wanted to make it right for Doretha. She wanted to kind of tell Doretha what to do to make things right. What did you hear Amy saying?
Please share in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
So people are saying, I can't believe, or stay out of trouble.
So those very judgmental, I can't believe that you would do this again. So very judgmental, right? You know,
I want you clean.
I want you clean. This is what I want. I want to make things right. Really not hearing or eliciting from Doretha her reasons for wanting to stop using. What was the impact of the writing reflex on Doretha, who the person making the change? What do you think? What was the impact?
So shame, expressing disappointment. Doretha felt shut down.
Yes, you saw Doretha kind of shut down. Okay. So you saw that that shame and shutting down.
Feeling disrespected, disconnected. She told the therapist what she wanted to hear is what they're sharing in the chat. Defensive, low to little impact. The probability of change seems minimal. Disrespected.
What are some examples of times in the past when you may have exhibited the writing reflex? I mean, and you can use the chat if you're comfortable, if you can just reflect on what those times might have been. You know, Amy appeared for all intents and purposes kind, and you know, it's some of the judgmental statements came out a little snarky at times, but you know, it was under the guise of really wanting to help Doretha, right? But as you kind of just said, that shut Doretha down, that shut, you know, that feeling of shame and just not wanting to continue that conversation. So what are some of the problems that arise if practitioners are too quick to jump in and fix or offer solutions to the person's problem?
So people are mentioning creating a power differential.
Yeah. Even though your intentions may be good and you may think that you're helping the person by providing some good advice or helping to fix the situation, you have to recognize that the change comes from within that person. And MI provides an approach that you can use to help avoid the writing reflex and support the person to build that intrinsic motivation. So with this example we just shared, that intrinsic motivation really, you could tell that Doretha just kind of gave up. I mean, she doesn't, you could see that by her saying, okay, you know, perhaps there was some intrinsic motivation, but the terms and the way Amy was using the writing reflex certainly didn't elicit from Doretha. So we're going to just summarize quickly because we're going to move into the spirit, but we talked about today MI as an approach to help people who are considering change. We defined motivational interviewing as a collaborative conversational approach to helping people make changes, help strengthen their own motivation and commitment to change. We examined and took a closer look at communication styles, looking at those guiding, that guiding style being right there in the middle. We saw that practitioners may be quick at times to offer solutions and suggestions to individuals making a change. And this strategy oftentimes generates discord and sustained talk that, you know, suggests that the person will maintain that status quo. MI emphasizes the practitioner's role. So we're gonna dive a little deeper into the spirit of MI. We mentioned it in the very beginning of the session. Now we're going to build on what we've learned and really build on that communication style that add and discuss in detail the 4 elements that make up the spirit. So we're going to continue to look at the parts of an MI that are not specific to techniques. We're going to describe the 4 elements, explore how each of these 4 elements contributes to positive behavior change or goal attainment. We're going to reflect on our own individual change process, maybe using some of those examples from earlier this afternoon. And then we're going to talk about ways to convey the spirit of MI in our work as behavioral health practitioners. We'll have a chance at the end of everything to answer questions, and please, if you have questions throughout, you can certainly add those to the chat. But this whole module is going to focus on the spirit of MI. It's important. Without the spirit of MI really isn't motivational interviewing. Without, Miller and Rolnick have said that practicing the techniques of MI without manifesting and conveying the spirit is like knowing the words of a song, but not the music. I love the analogies that they use, very eloquent. It also doesn't work. The presence of the spirit of MI is really related to the positive outcomes of motivational interviewing. So it comprises of, or encompasses these 4 elements. So we're going to talk about partnership, acceptance, evocation, and compassion. And we're going to talk about each of these, and the way of being is the basis for all MI interactions. So we're going to review each of these in detail. But before we get started, think about, we're not breaking up in groups, but consider the characteristics of that person you identified who was supporting you in that change that we talked about earlier. How did they partner with you? So when we think about partnership, so as I'm kind of describing what partnership is, ask yourself these questions. How did it feel to have the person partner with you? How would you describe the opposite of this partnership? So MI uses a collaborative approach. Power is shared, and the practitioner works to diminish any power differential between themselves and the person making the change, so that neither looks to the practitioner as the expert. So as you saw in the recording with Amy and Doretha, many of you mentioned in the chat that you saw that power differential, and MI, and particularly this element of partnership, helps to diminish. The practitioner values the person who's making a change, their expertise about their own life. You want to avoid what in motivational interviewing they call the expert trap. You don't want to be the one who has all the answers, right? So what do you think the expert trap looks like in practice? So if you think about maybe your own practice, your own colleagues, even, you don't have to, if you're not comfortable typing this in the chat, but what does that expert trap look like? Because we want to avoid that. We want to partner with someone. So think about that. The expert trap can be seen when a provider communicates to the person considering the change that their professional expertise is sufficient to solve the person's problems. For a provider to avoid this trap, they need to let go of this assumption that they have or are supposed to have, and need to provide all of the answers for the client. So, really thinking about when you're the person who supported your change, how did they partner with you? So consider that person. How did they partner with you and possibly avoid that expert trap? And if you can use the chat for this response, that would be great.
The people are sharing that choosing your words carefully, considering the delivery as well.
Yeah.
Using active listening, positive or constructive feedback, listening to the people who wanted choices, inviting them to reflect on the past experience, endless understanding of how I was feeling, both positive and negative, having a shared lived experience,
Yeah.
if,
So
if applicable at times.
yes. Yeah. So sharing a lived experience, if it's a, applicable in that setting, and it's something that would benefit the person you're meeting with. So, really you're talking about how the person that you felt supported by, partnered with you, are really all of those things that avoided the expert trap. From what Kati just read, no one came in, out there ready to, solve all your problems. No one said, like, I'm gonna take care of this for you. I know exactly what you need to do. They listened to you. They heard you. They were respectful. They used active listening. They were positive and provided this element of acceptance. So thank you for sharing that. And as we're kind of thinking about the spirit, some additional examples of partnership, listening without interrupting. So that's a really hard one for me. A lot of times I have to almost like sit on my hands to resist the urge to interrupt. I'm of course getting better because I recognize that that's a limitation in my listening skills. Not just telling someone, what they have to do or how they can behave. Someone who partnered with me asked questions to help better understand where I was coming from, my point of view. So when we go into acceptance, the second element of the spirit of MI, you may be familiar with the concept, and I think people mentioned it in the chat earlier, of unconditional positive regard. Acceptance in motivational interviewing conveys a similar idea. We accept someone exactly as they are and where they are. Acceptance shows that we have respect for the person's freedom of choice. It's comprised of these 4 areas: absolute worth, believing that the person making the change has inherent worth and they deserve respect and should be treated with dignity. Empathy, the provider seeks to understand the person making the change's point of view, what their experiences are, what their emotions are, even if it's not explicitly said. Maybe body language is saying something. Autonomy, really respecting the person making the change, and the fact that they're in control of the change and the change process. The practitioner encourages the person to be responsible for making the change and recognizes that the change may occur or may not occur in the way or on the schedule that the practitioner would like. In fact, it may not happen at all, but autonomy means that the practitioner accepts and respects the person's decision. And then finally, affirmation is recognizing and highlighting the strengths and positive characteristics of the person making the change, particularly the things that may support the change. Affirmation helps convey the practitioner's belief in the person's ability to make the change. Remember, early on, we talked about MI having the value of optimism and hope and positive, a positive outcome. So that this idea of affirming and using, affirmations are part of the MI technical skills that we'll talk about later. But conveying acceptance to someone who is doing what they think they should do is relatively easy. However, it's not realistic to think that every person we work with will take all of the steps the way that we'd like them on the timeline that we think is acceptable. But we accept them anyway. And acceptance doesn't equate to approval or agreement, but it does mean that we are still going to be with them as they go through the change process. So that non-judgmental acceptance. So, who in your life supports you and accepts you for the person that you are? there may be times when you want to make a change and it just isn't happening. And you might say that, over and over, you're going to continue to make a certain change. And there might be people in your life who continue to support you and accept you for the person you are. And maybe, that's conveyed in certain ways. So think about who in your life supports and accepts you. And what does being truly accepted allow you to do? So when you think about the person in your life who accepts you as the person you are, what does that allow you to do, or how does that allow you to be? You can use the chat if you want.
People are mentioning family.
Yeah.
A lot of relatives, family. Acceptance helps build a trusting and supportive relationship. It allows people to try new things and take steps toward change without feeling judged if things don't go well. So if I can reflect on people in my life who have accepted me for the person I am, it allows me to try out different things and not feel judged. I'm going to try this new, burn boot camp and not feel judged if it doesn't work out and I end up not going for, a long time. I'm not, the person who supports me isn't going to make me feel like I'm any less of a person, or, they're going to help me figure out maybe ways to improve that area of my life. So compassion, this third element, according to Miller and Rolnick, you'll see here, it's a deliberate commitment to pursue the welfare and best interest of the other person. Compassion in MI refers to the needs of the person making the change being first and foremost. Practitioners really seek to understand the person's values and experiences without judgment of the person's thoughts or behaviors or actions. So, thinking about Amy's response to Doretha, you saw a lot of the judgment in some of the questions that she would ask, or the tone that she was using, judging those behaviors that Doretha described. We do this even if these conflict with our own ideas about the change. So, the person might have their own thoughts and ideas about what would be best, and we're compassionate and we're committed, and we seek to understand the other person's point of view, which allows us to suspend judgment and blame, and instead recognize the experience and value, the values and the motivations of the other person. So think about a change or the change that you identified earlier, and how did others show compassion for you during that time? So thinking about this deliberate commitment to pursue the welfare and the best interest of the person, seeking to understand the person's point of view, suspending judgment, blame, recognizing that your experience and values and motivations were important. So how did others show compassion during that time when you were making that change? You can use the chat. Anything coming up, Kati? Not yet. People are
Okay.
typing, I think.
Okay.
So how did people show compassion during that change?
Mm-hmm.
Listening and responding.
Listening and responding.
listening without judging, showing
Listening.
compassion by sharing information or resources,
Mm-hmm.
patience, support,
Yep.
asking more questions to know how to support, and supporting with use of their own time,
Yep.
encouraging even when it was rough.
So absolutely, all of those elements help the person feel that there's a compassion element to the relationship, and just also to be very mindful of your own self-compassion. So practicing that yourself, being giving yourself taking care of yourself and making sure that you're exhibiting the self-compassion is also important. So the fourth component of the spirit of MI is evocation. When the practitioner elicits from the person making a change, the reasons for the change, and ideas about how the change will happen. So again, going back to the writing reflex video, we saw that there was really no eliciting from Doretha about the reasons for the change and her ideas about the change and how it will happen. We want to elicit from the person what their reasons for making the change are, right? So this conveys to the person that they have the resources, right? They have the motivation within themselves to successfully make the change. The practitioner listens with curiosity, you're listening with patience. You're not offering your own ideas or opinions. The reasons and the process for change will come from the person making the change. Also, people are more likely to change when they come up with reasons themselves. So, that discord and continuing with the sustained talk, it really, when the practitioner is putting their own reasons for the change and not eliciting from the person why they want to change. As we saw when we were discussing the other three elements of MI spirit, practitioners who partner with, accept, show compassion, build relationships that facilitate the evoking and drawing out of information related to the person's change. So those other three elements, the compassion, acceptance, partnership, really do help kind of lead to this evocation. They help us build the relationship with the person to evoke and draw out information related to change. Certain skills, such as using open-ended questions, which we're going to talk about, can also help with evocation. So we'll get to those in our later module. But so again, think about the change that you identified earlier, and identify at least two ways that the person who supported you or people who supported you drew out or evoked from you your reasons for change or the process that you used to make the change. So how did they draw out from you your reasons for the change or the process that you wanted to use to make that change happen? So I know for me, in the burn boot camp example, it's like an exercise, gym type thing, training. The person I was talking to, did ask, well, what do you think will happen? Do you think, what are some of the benefits of it? What are some of the positive outcomes that you might see? Maybe they didn't say it in such a counseling tone, but they were drawing that from me in a way that made me really think about what the benefits might be. Kati, anything in the chat?
Yes, so people are saying understanding, showing interest, and providing feedback, respecting choices, reflected their own interests, and then shared and connected with the change.
So maybe finding a shared area of that change to connect with.
Serving as a container for the client's overflow. Bringing feelings and memories that support the change. Someone shared that their mentor continuously asked the difference the change would make in their life, and identify the skill strength that they knew about themselves in order to make that change. Yeah,
so pointing out what those strengths are, what those skills that we might already have that would help with the change. You've done this before. I know that you're able to, get up early and make a commitment to an exercise routine. I've seen you do that with other routines. So emphasizing those skills and those strengths. So just independently, we're going to just do a quick self-reflection. Take a moment to think about how we're already embodying the spirit of MI in our work and how we can grow to more fully convey the spirit. So we're going to spend just a few minutes, just independently, not in breakout groups. Think about which elements of MI, of the spirit of MI, the MI spirit best fits with how you currently work. Which elements might pose some challenges to how you currently work. And finally, why might you be interested in bringing all MI spirit elements to your work? You can use the chat. Give people a couple minutes to type it out. So which elements of MI spirit best fit how you currently work? Partnership, acceptance, compassion, evocation. So think about those four. Which elements, partnership, compassion, acceptance, evocation, might pose some challenge to how you currently work? And then finally, why might you be interested in bringing all MI spirit elements to your work? Hati, anything? Oh, and it looks like Ivis, Trejo raised their hand.
Okay, so first let's go over some of the comments. Giving feedback and to be proud, checking in on themselves as well. What is working, what is not, what do they need? Being a good listener and giving feedback when appropriate. The back and forth, the collaborative nature, using good listening skills, partnership, acceptance when the rest of the world judges them. So now let's go to the raised hand.
Thank you. So that acceptance when everyone else might be judging you is so important. Someone who may be having some different challenges and maybe their family and others in their lives may not agree and may have not be there. So as a practitioner, being there, accepting the person where they are, knowing that, that person knowing that they can come to you because they won't be judged and you will be there to listen regardless of what is currently happening in their lives. Yes, Katya.
Ivis, your microphone is in mute.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time with the chat panel. So I think that in my case, like compassion and active listening are like super important. I think another way that we can relate to people that we're not, that we're being non-judgmental is to tell them, it's okay to take baby steps. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to do, you know, if you want to do a change, you don't have to do this from one day to another. You know, it's okay to take baby steps, you know,
So
just
supporting the
a
person
little
where they
something every
are.
day, you know. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. Very, very helpful. Very, very good insight. Anyone else before we move on want to talk about maybe elements that might pose a challenge? Like what are some challenges that you can see? Which elements are more challenging to incorporate or might pose some challenges to you?
So someone shared in the chat, finding the right words or way to express the truth, and don't ever gaslight them.
Yeah. So finding the right words, those OARS techniques we're going to talk about are going to help you find those words and refine your skills of eliciting and evoking out. So that could be challenging. So making sure that you're, you know, saying what you mean, and the person is able to recognize that you're there to help and support them.
Someone shared providing the tools and not coming in and knowing it all, to utilize the family's knowledge and expertise in order to help provide services and develop a partnership. People are biased to service and are not trusting. Evocation may be a bit of a challenge at first, finding their own flow and delivery. 3, it is important working with youth and families who are utilizing the aspect of systems of care to help direct, guide, and provide. More importantly, help continue to learn and adapt properly with the communities that they're serving. We have a few more.
The evocation, just to kind of stop there for a minute, might be challenging. It sounds like to some people who, you know, really many individuals that you work with may be coming from systems and services that might be more directive or and like confrontive and a more directive style. So, you know, it might take some time to develop a relationship based on a more guiding style where you are evoking from the person. The person might be very used to someone kind of taking on a more directive approach. So yes, I think we're going to move on just to the next. We're not going to touch on that right now. We're going to summarize, and then we'll have any questions. So the summary is really the person making the change is the expert. So this module, Spirit of MI, highlighted a way of being with people that supports change and makes up the spirit of MI. Partnership, acceptance, compassion, and evocation. These elements of the spirit allow us to build a solid relationship with the person who is making the change and help us to convey that we recognize a couple of things: that the person making the change is the expert in their own lives, that the person has value, and we support their autonomy, that we work in service of them. And that they have the wisdom and the resources within themselves to make the change. So the spirit of MI is just as important as the techniques we're going to learn about in our upcoming sessions. As we get into some of those specific skills, it'll be important to remember that those skills won't have the intended outcome if they aren't paired with the spirit and those elements of the spirit of MI. So when we come back together, we'll begin to focus on the more concrete processes and methods of motivational interviewing. So I hope that you're all able to join us next week for our session 2, which will be our 3rd and 4th modules, which will talk about the technical elements. So going over some of those, you know, looking for change talk, hearing change talk, also getting into the communication techniques, OARS, and other active listening. So are there any questions that people have before we move forward? I know Kati has a couple of closing slides to review.
Yes, I just wanted to announce that, yes, we will share the presenter's slide deck. Within 7 days, it will be posted on our website. You may download them from there in a PDF file format, as well as access the recording of this 2-hour webinar held in this meeting format. So if you have any questions for Joni, please share them in the chat box and I will read them aloud, because maybe someone else had the similar question.
And then what we'll also do is send out the downloadable links to our website where you can follow along. The links are to the manual that we developed, the Training of Trainers manual, where you'll be able to see the notes section. So, some of the slides had very little content, but the notes section can give you a little bit more of that content. Any questions coming in, Kati?
So they're wondering about a good book related to MI and what is the website to get these notes. So the person who's asking the question, I will do the follow-up email and then we can include any any resources. We have also TTC resources available, and any books, Joni, that you'd like to share, we can also link those as well.
Well, these are the two references from today in bibliography. Michelle Drapkin is a motivational interviewing network of trainers trainer. Her information is here. She contributed extensively to our Training of Trainers. Miller and Rolnick, of course, their most recent edition. I think it's their most recent. I believe, I'm pretty sure it is, of motivational interviewing, helping people to change, is available. If we have any other resources, we will certainly send those along, but there are a wealth of resources on our MHTTC page, but also the TTC network main page. There are several resources. So we will be sending those out when we send out the recordings and the slides. And Kati, if you wanted to.
Yeah, sure. So as mentioned before, all of our training events are sponsored by SAMHSA, and as part of this funding, we are required to evaluate all of our products and services and training events. So on the screen, you will see a QR code. You can scan the QR code to access our evaluation survey, or you may also click on the link that I shared in the chat box to also access the evaluation survey. It is short, and the more feedback we receive, the better. That way we know what your needs are and what we can also work on. We also have a wellness and recovery podcast channel. We currently have a podcast series on flourishing at work, a helping plan for professionals. So you may access them wherever you get your podcast: Spotify, Apple Music, Podbean. Next slide, please. Also, if you missed any of our previous webinars, you may watch them by accessing our resources, products and resources catalog, by also scanning the QR code that you see on your screen. Again, we ask you to wait for 7 days before the recording of this webinar will be posted on our website, as well as the presenter slide, and a certificate of completion will be emailed to the email address that you registered with within 7 days of this webinar broadcast. And if you'd like to connect with us, please do so by following us on all of our social media channels. So we are on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And again, we want to thank you all. Thank you, Joni. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, for being so interactive with us, and to participate actively in these exercises. We hope that you join us next week. If you haven't registered, I will send out an email with the registration link so that you can join us again at the same time.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.